Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen is back in the U.S. after what she called a successful trip to Beijing. The secretary spoke exclusively with Margaret Brennan on Face the Nation before departing China, and she said the U.S. is pushing for a mutually beneficial economic relationship with the nation.
I had a very constructive visit. I received a warm welcome and had very substantive series of meetings. We had substantive conversations about the global economy, developments in our own economies, financial markets, and a list of concerns that each of us brought to the table that we agreed to follow up on over time.
Liz Palmer is in Tokyo with more on the visit. So, Liz, we talked a little bit as Janet Yellen was actually in China. This was supposed to be a successful trip. What is success?
Well, first of all, the mood music was important, and she was, as she said, warmly received. They were courteous, more than courteous, I would say warm, you know. But in a way, the trip itself, just the fact that it happened is the main point. You know, there were no official visits since 2018 from the U.S. to China. And of course, a deepening chill throughout the pandemic in U.S.-China relations. Now, Yellen is the second cabinet minister to visit in less than a month because Anthony Blinken was there in June, as you know. So it really was a very important step in resetting normal diplomatic relations with China and establishing channels where disputes can be discussed and managed.
And so she certainly had to sort of thread the needle, because she's also not only sort of encouraging open communication, but she also has to make it very clear where the boundaries are, where the lines are drawn in terms of American businesses and other things. So what else did she tell the Chinese officials?
Well, the tone overall was soothing and reassuring and friendly. She pointed out that America and China, the two largest economies on the planet, could not only coexist but thrive. There was enough room for both of them to do well. But then she had the tough message, and the tough message is there should be rules, there should be guardrails, not only to protect American businesses in China, but also to defend American restrictions, especially on sophisticated semiconductors, on national security grounds. We don't know what went on in the closed meetings. There were long, intense, 10 hours in all, face-to-face talk. It's likely, she told the Chinese, that the U.S. was not only going to restrict trade, they know about that, but that it was thinking of restricting investment into sectors like high-end chips and AI, also on national security grounds. And the Chinese are clearly not happy about that.
So speaking of the mood music, how did Beijing characterize this visit?
Much harder to read because they're not as open as the U.S. in giving information, however vague, about the visit. But we do know that they're not happy, as I said, with the trade restrictions. We had a little signal of that when the news agency Xinhua reported that the Premier of China, Li Qiang, told Secretary Yellen that overstretching, as he put it, the concept of national security does no good for economic development on either side. If you'll remember, in the spring, President Xi accused the U.S. of trying to contain China, basically to stop its rise. And they see these trade restrictions to high-end technology as proof of that. Janet Yellen may have said, look, it's in the interests of our national security, and it is. But the bottom line is they are designed to keep China from developing even more strength as an adversary. So you can see China's point. They're not happy. That's not to say they're right, but they're not happy. They may want to just keep that staging furniture in place because as Janet Yellen returns to Washington, John Kerry is packing his bags. He's slated to visit Beijing. Now, people may recall, because we haven't heard a lot from him, I think, lately. It hasn't been in the news, but he is the climate envoy for the president. So, of course, climate change is what I expect he's going to be talking about.
we can't move the needle or the thermometer on climate change if we don't have cooperation between the second and the first, or the top two largest economies in the world.
That is for sure. And I have to tell you, China is a powerhouse in green technology. It's going to lead the way, is leading the way. Largest maker of solar panels. I was in Beijing this morning, and I was in a busy area, and I was thinking, gosh, it's quiet. You know, there's so many scooters and motorcycles around, but it's so quiet. And it occurred to me, all of them are e-scooters. They are going ahead in leaps and bounds. There is important common ground here between the U.S. and China, and John Kerry is going to try and capitalize on that. But he's also another step in this rebuilding of a multi-layered, professional, diplomatic structure where everything from trade to consular disputes can be ironed out, one great power to another. And if it all goes well, it's going to pave the way for the bosses to meet, Presidents Biden and Xi Jinping, face-to-face in San Francisco at the APEC conference mid-November.
Yeah, I find it very interesting. They're making sure that the way is paved very smoothly by sending all these sort of high-level people. I'm really glad that you brought up the gains that China has been making when it comes to climate change. It's something that we don't actually talk about a lot, but you know, when it comes to solar expansion and other areas of expanding green technology, they really have sort of, in some ways, shifted it into high gear. And there's a narrative a little bit that, you know, that China is uninterested in climate change, but clearly there is, when John Kerry arrives, there's going to be an opportunity to have a robust conversation.
Yes, and maybe some really important exchanges. Janet Yellen, when she was there, said, look, I'm trying to find common ground. Well, climate change is a clear and potentially hugely productive common ground, which would not only do good for the U.S. and China, but for the whole planet. So let's hope that takes off.
Indeed. Liz Palmer, thank you very much.